this video we're going to learn about the human eye. So this question is also one of the repeatedly asked questions in the zoology section. Basically we'll be asked to describe the structure of the human eye and its working mechanism. So the structure of the human eye, we're going to read it first, and then the working mechanism is almost 4-line answer. That's very simple. So first of all, let's go to the structure of the human eye. Basically, human eye, the eyes, they are the organs of vision in our body, and so they are called the photoreceptors. Photoreceptors means they receive the light and then they convert the light into signals, impulses, which is sent to the brain, and then brain shows the image. Okay, about that we'll be reading in the working mechanism. For now, the human eye, it is spherical. So first of all, we'll just give a morphological information about the human eye, then we'll go to the parts of the human eye. So it is a spherical hollow organ, okay, which is somewhat ball like. So it's a spherical hollow ball like, and its diameter, if you see, the diameter will be about 24 mm and its weight will be about 6 to 8 gram. Now about this information, it's your wish. If you remember, then you can write in the examination, otherwise it's not that important to write about this. Now the human eye, due to its shape, it is also known as eyeball, because it is ball like spherical, so it is also known as eyeball. So basically this eyeball, it is supported by 6 sets of muscle. It is supported by the 6 sets of muscles. Now these muscles, they extend from the eye orbit to the outer side of the eyeball. What that means is, if this is the eyeball and this is the eye orbit is the socket into which the eyeball is fit. It is the socket of the skull. It means it is the hollow space. So from that eye orbit towards the outer side of the eyeball, both upper and lower side, on both the sides, 6 sets of muscles, they support the eyeball and they help the eyeball to look up, down and side to side. So these 6 sets of muscles, they can be divided into 2 groups. First is rectus muscles and the second one is oblique muscles. Okay, now rectus has 4 types. First of all, we have superior rectus, then we have inferior rectus. Similarly, we have internal rectus and 4 external rectus. Quite easy to remember: superior, inferior, interior, exterior. And then oblique muscles also, we have 2 types, because total it should be 6, so 4 and 2. So it has inferior and superior types, internal, external. So again, this information, if you remember, you can write. If not, then not that necessary. But see, the eyeball, it is supported by 6 sets of muscles, which is extending from the eye orbit to the outer side of the eyeball. The muscles can be divided into 2 groups: rectus and oblique. So rectus are for the superior, inferior, interior, exterior, and oblique are inferior oblique and superior oblique. Now this is the basic morphological structure of the eye. Now basically the eyeball, it consists of 3 layers. Now this is the information we'll be writing in the examination. This eyeball, it consists of 3 layers. So the 3 layers of the eyeball, first we need to remember all those 3 layers. So first of all, we have the outer layer, the outer fibrous layer. Now this outer fibrous layer means it consists of muscles, fibrous tissues, so it is known as fibrous layer. Then we have middle vascular layer. Now always vascular means containing blood vessels. And the last, we have the retina, which is the inner layer. So these are the 3 layers of the eyeball. We're going to read about these 3 layers in detail. So outer fibrous layer, middle vascular, retina. So this outer fibrous layer, further it is divided into 3 parts, middle into 3 parts, and retina is a single part. So outer fibrous, if we divide outer fibrous into 3 parts, first of all we have sclera, then we have cornea, then we have conjunctiva. Now as I will be telling you about each of this, you will remember all the names very easily. For now I'm just telling you for the glance that middle we have 3 parts. Again, the 3 parts are choroid, the ciliary body, and finally the last one, iris. So basically we're gonna write about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and then 7 about retina. So about the 7 parts of the eye we're going to write in detail, and that will be enough for the structure. Now basically we'll write 3 to 4 lines about each of these. Now these 3 to 4 lines must contain three things. First of all, it must contain its position, where this layer lies. Second, its composition, what it is made up of. This is the way to remember, okay? And third, its function. So if we write these three things about each of these, that will be enough for the examination. So remember, we need to write the position of each and everything, composition, and then function. So let us begin. So first of all, we need to write that the eyeball consists of three layers: outer fibrous, middle vascular, and retina. Then outer fibrous. So the outer fibrous layer, first of all, we have the sclera. Now what is basically sclera? Now sclera, it is the outermost covering. It is the external covering of the eyeball, and it is white in color, so it forms the white of the eye. Now basically, if you see the eyeball, this is not the figure you need to make. This is just a rough figure I'm drawing for making you understand. So if this is the eyeball and here is the lens, okay, so if this is the eyeball, then this part, the outer part, the outer covering, outermost external covering is the sclera. So it is the external covering. Now I told you we need to write three things: position, composition, function. So first of all, position done, external covering, the outermost layer you can write, okay? And then now we need to write about the composition. So what is made up of? I told you the outer fibrous layer. Now since it is fibrous layer, it must be made up of fibrous tissues, connective tissues, okay? So it is made up of fibrous connective tissues. Pretty easy to remember, because it is fibrous layer, so it is made up of fibrous connective tissues. Now that's about the composition. Now finally, what is the function of the sclera? Now it's very clear. If it is the outermost covering, external covering, it has the function to maintain the shape and protect. So it maintains the shape and protects the eyeball. So that's all about the sclera. 3 lines enough. So second, we have the cornea, okay? Now cornea, basically it is also a part of the sclera. You see, I told you sclera is the outermost covering, isn't it? So this is the outermost covering, but this outermost covering is in the entire eyeball, but the portion which is in front of the eyeball, the front portion, the front external covering is known as cornea. So see, this eyeball, it consists of outer covering, external covering. Now the external covering is called sclera except for the front part. In the front part, that same external covering is known as the cornea. So basically, cornea is the part of the sclera, and if you see the ratio, it is 1/6 of the sclera. So basically, it is the part of the sclera, but it is just the part that's lying in front of the eyeball. So first of all, position, I told you, so it lies in the front of the eyeball. Then if you talk about the composition, it is made up of sclera. So basically the composition is the same fibrous connective tissues. But remember one thing, that this sclera is a bit thick and this cornea is a bit thin. This sclera is thicker one and cornea is bit thinner. Why it is thin? It allows the light to pass through this. It is transparent, okay? It is transparent and thinner. Now it is thin so that the light can pass easily through it and go to the lens. So its function from here we can know, it allows the light to pass. So that's all about the sclera and cornea. Once again, I'm telling you, sclera is the external covering. It's made up of fibrous connective tissue and protects the eyeball. Now cornea is the part of the sclera, just it is the part which is in front of the eyeball, and since it is in front of the eyeball, it is transparent so that the light can pass through it. Now we have the last part of the outer fibrous layer, which is the conjunctiva. The third part, conjunctiva. Now see, conjunctiva is very easy. Conjunctiva is basically present in front of the cornea. This is the cornea, and in front of the cornea one more protective layer is there, which is the conjunctiva. So once again, I am showing you here, drawing the eyeball. So if this is the eyeball, the outer protective layer here is sclera, and till it reaches here, this is sclera and this is cornea. But in front of the cornea we also have one more protective layer, and this protective layer is known as conjunctiva. So first of all, position in front of the cornea, okay, the front part of the eyeball in front of the cornea. Now we need to write about the composition first of all. So now remember, the thing you need to remember here is that conjunctiva, it is lying in front of the cornea. I told you that cornea is a thin part, transparent part. So conjunctiva should also be thin so that the light can pass through it. Now conjunctiva should be thin. So the thinnest type of epithelial cell, it is the squamous epithelium. The stratified squamous epithelium cell is the thinnest type of epithelial cells. The other epithelial cells, cuboidal and columnar, if this is cuboidal and columnar, these are very thick, so light cannot pass through them. So the thickest type of epithelial cell is stratified squamous epithelium. It is somewhat very thin in structure, okay. So it is made up of the thinnest type of epithelial cell, which is the stratified squamous epithelium. So this is the way to remember that it must be thin. So the thinnest type of epithelial cell, which is the stratified squamous, so it must be made up of that. So it is made up of stratified squamous epithelial cells. Now the function, basically it protects the cornea. Okay, so that's all about the outer fibrous layer. With this we complete 1/3 of the part of the eyeball. Very easy till now. Outer fibrous layer done. Okay, all three you understood. Now we go to the middle vascular layer. So now in the middle vascular layer we have first of all the choroid. Okay, now you need to remember the names here. So choroid, it is situated just below the sclera. So here this is the rough figure of the eyeball. You can see this is the eyeball and this is the sclera, which is the outermost covering. Here it is the cornea, so this is sclera, this is the cornea, and in front of the cornea one more protective layer, which is the conjunctiva. So this choroid is a layer which is lying just below the sclera. So it is just a layer which is lying below the sclera. So now this layer is known as the choroid. That's all about the position just below the sclera. Now basically it consists of blood vessels and pigmented cells. That's about the composition. After position we need to write about the composition. So say it is the middle vascular layer. I told you if it is the vascular layer, it must be containing of blood vessels. So it is made up of blood vessels, but along with blood vessels it also consists of some pigmented cells. What is meant by pigmented cells? Pigmented cells are such cells which contain a pigment called melanin. Okay, now due to this melanin, this is a dark part of the eye. So this choroid, basically it is dark in color. Now why it is dark, we'll be reading about this right now. So it is dark in color due to the presence of the cells known as pigmented cells containing melanin. Now it is dark because it helps in the absorption of the light. That is about the function. So what happens is that when light enters into this eyeball, if it is not dark, it may reflect outside, but since it is dark, the pigmented cells are there, so this choroid, it absorbs the light and it does not allow the light to again reflect outside of the eyeball. So basically that's all about the choroid, just lying below the sclera, which is dark in color due to cells, pigmented cells, and it consists of blood vessels. Now it helps in the absorption of light so that the light does not reflect outside of the eyeball. So the second part of the middle vascular layer, we have the ciliary body. So see, if we look at the eyeball, we know that the lens is lying here, okay, but this ciliary body is a part which is lying just above and below the lens. Now you need to see that this choroid, it extends till here, and then what happens is that a set of muscles come here. It is a muscular part. A type of muscle comes here which extends somewhat in this shape. Now this shape you need to remember, okay, it is a muscle which goes like this and a bit of it goes out, goes in front of the lens. So somewhat this shape of muscles are there. These muscles are known as ciliary muscles or ciliary body. So about the position, if you write, you see that it is just lying above and below the lens, above and below the lens. And now what about the composition? It is I told you that it is a muscular layer, okay. So muscular layer means it consists of the muscles. Now these muscles are known as ciliary muscles. So ciliary body, basically it is a part which is made up of the ciliary muscles. Now these ciliary muscles are a type of smooth muscles. Now, what is the function of these ciliary muscles? These ciliary muscles, what happens is that if they contract, the size of the lens, it becomes more. Ciliary muscles are attached to the lens. Okay, so when the ciliary muscles contract, the size of the lens also extends, and then when the ciliary muscles they relax, the size of the lens, it becomes shorter. So what is happening is that these ciliary muscles, they are helping the lens to alter its shape. So it alters the shape of the lens. Now, what is happening because of the alteration of the shape of the lens? The shape of the lens alters for the accommodation. Now, accommodation, basically it is a mechanism for the absorption of correct amount of light. Like in dim light, we need to absorb more light. So what happens is that these ciliary muscles, they contract. So this eye lens, it becomes more larger in size. Basically it extends, and in bright light, what happens is that these ciliary muscles, they contract, and eye lens becomes less in shape, less in area. So in this way, in dim light, the eye lens, it absorbs more light, and in bright light it absorbs less light. So in this way, it is helping in the accommodation. So basically that's all about the ciliary body, above and below the lens, and it is made up of the ciliary muscles, and it helps to alter the shape of the lens, which is known as accommodation. So that's about the ciliary body. And now we have the last part of the middle vascular layer, which is the iris. Now, as I said you that these ciliary muscles, they go in front of the lens, and then it extends in front of the lens. So this extended part, this is known as the iris. So basically it is lying in front of the lens, slightly above and below the lens. Okay, above and below the lens, which is the part of the ciliary body. So the composition will be same as the ciliary body, since it is the part of the ciliary body. But now, what is the function of this iris? So basically this iris, it controls the size of the pupil. You can see there is space between the two irises. This space between the two irises is known as pupil. Okay, so pupil is the area through which the light enters into the lens. So this iris, basically it is controlling the size of the pupil. If the iris if the iris contracts, the size of the pupil will be more, and then more light will be absorbed. Similarly, if the iris it expands like this, then the size of the pupil will be less. It means that the area between them will be less, so less light will be absorbed. In this way, it controls the shape of the size of the it controls the size of the pupil. And pupil, it is the area between two irises, which is lying just in front of the eye lens. So that's about the middle vascular layer. Once again, we'll read about the middle vascular layer. So see, first of all, choroid, which is a part which is just lying below the sclera. It is dark in color due to blood vessels and pigmented cells. Now it helps in the absorption of light so that the light does not reflect out. Then we have the ciliary body. The ciliary body, it is holding the lens, and it helps to alter the shape of the lens, made up of ciliary muscles. Now iris, basically iris is the part of the ciliary muscles, but which lies in front of the lens. It controls the size of the pupil, which is the area between the two irises. So we did the outer fibrous layer, we did the middle vascular layer. Now we have the final layer, which is the retina. So retina is basically a part which is the innermost layer of the eye. If we see the eyeball once again, this part, which is the innermost layer of the eyeball, this part is known as the retina, which is lying at the back side of the eyeball. So basically, about the position, it is the innermost layer which is lying at the back side of the eyeball. Okay, so now it is this retina, it is a very sensitive and highly delicate part. Basically the composition, if we see, it consists of two types of cells. Now these cells, basically they are photoreceptor cells. Again, photoreceptor means those cells which can absorb the light rays. So photoreceptor cells are present. There are two types of photoreceptor cells present in the retina. We're talking about the composition. Okay, as I said, we will write about the position, composition, and then the function. So this is the composition. Photoreceptor cells, it is of two types. Rod cells and cone cells are present there. So these rod cells are the cells which consist of pigment rhodopsin, and these cone cells consist of a pigment iodopsin. So rhodopsin and iodopsin, you can remember, are for rod cells and I for the cone cells. So rhodopsin is a pigment which helps for the vision in the dim light. Now it produces poor images of the objects, and basically it produces images in the dim light. So it produces poor images in the dim light. But these cone cells, it consists of the pigment iodopsin, and iodopsin, they function in the bright light, and they produce very clear image of the object, very acute image, and it is responsible for the color vision. So that's about the rod cells and cone cells. Okay, so now there's a fun fact about this. There is a small depression on the retina wall. If you see the eyeball, once again I'm to draw this eyeball. So if this is the retina, directly I'm just drawing the retina, this is the lens. So at the center level on this retina there is a small depression. It is not this continuous, it goes like this, and a depression is there. This depression is known as fovea centralis. Now what happens is that at this depression there are only cone cells. There is no rod cells present here. Only cone cells are there, no rod cells. And most of the light, since it is focused here, so it produces the most sharp and the acute vision. It produces the sharpest and the acute vision. This area is known as fovea centralis. Even in 1 marks this is asked many times. What is fovea centralis? So it is the central depression on the retina wall which consists of only cone cells, no rod cells, and produces the sharpest and acute vision. Similarly, we have one area known as dark spot. So all this information is carried to the brain via the optic nerves. So the point where the optic nerves is entering the eyeball, at that point there are no cells, no photoreceptor cells, no cone cells, no rod cells. So no image is formed there. That spot is known as the blind spot. So basically fovea centralis and blind spot are 1 marks questions. So blind spot is a place where the optic nerves is entering into the eyeball, and there are no photoreceptor cells, no cone cells, no rod cells. So no image is formed there. So that's all about the retina. With this we complete the 3 parts of the eyeball, which is the outer fibrous, middle vascular, and retina. Once again, the outer fibrous, it has 3 parts: sclera, cornea, conjunctiva. Basically these are the outer coverings which are protecting the eye. Then we have the middle vascular layer. So middle vascular layer, it has choroid, which is lying just below the sclera, which is helping in the absorption of the light. Then we have the ciliary body, which is controlling the size of the lens, and similarly iris, which is the part of the ciliary body controlling the size of the pupil. And finally we have the retina, which is the innermost layer where the image of the object is formed, because it consists of the cells. These cells, they absorb the light, and then the image of the object is formed. So finally the function of the retina is it forms the image of the object. So after writing all these 3 things, about all these 3 things, we need to write a bit about the lens, which will be merely 4 to 5 lines, and then the structure of the eye will be completed. So here we're not going to write something which we haven't learned ahead in the structure of the eye. So lens, basically it is a transparent biconvex elastic body. If you can see, it is biconvex. This type of structure is known as biconvex, and this type is known as biconcave. So lens is basically a crystalline biconvex and fibrous part, and it is even transparent because light can enter through it. So these are the special characters of the lens. It is holded by ciliary muscles. As I told you, in the middle vascular layer, it is holded by the ciliary muscles, which controls the size of the lens, these ciliary muscles. And yeah, it helps in the accommodation as well. So basically this is 4 to 5 lines we'll write about the lens. But lastly, we also have to write that the lens divides the eyeball into 2 chambers. If you're seeing, there is the lens, and ahead and beside the lens there are 2 chambers. So about these 2 chambers we need to write. So lens, basically it is separating the eyeball into two chambers. Now these two chambers are known as, first of all, the aqueous humor, or the aqueous chamber you can call it, and then we have the vitreous chamber. So aqueous chamber, it is the part which is lying in front of the lens. So basically it is the area between the lens, and here we have the cornea. So it is the area between the lens and the cornea, and this area, it is filled with a watery solution which is known as the aqueous humor. So that's about the aqueous chamber. And then vitreous chamber. Vitreous chamber is the area which is lying between the lens and this retina. So it is lying between the lens and retina, and it is also filled with a fluidy substance which is known as the vitreous humor. And on the basis of this aqueous humor and vitreous humor, these two chambers are given the name aqueous chamber and the vitreous chamber. Now the function of this aqueous chamber and vitreous chamber is just to nourish the lens and the retina as well as the cornea. It nourishes them. So that's all about the structure of the eyeball. Once again, first we'll write about the three parts of the eyeball, and then finally about the lens. A bit about the lens. This is merely 4 to 5 lines. Even if you don't remember this, you can write that the lens, it is holded by the ciliary muscles and it separates the eyeball into two chambers. You can write about these two chambers. So with this we complete the structure of the eyeball. But now the working mechanism. The working mechanism is very easy. So basically after writing about the structure of the eyeball, we'll draw the structure of the eye. So this figure needs to be drawn. This is just a rough figure, but the clean figure should be drawn. That I'll show you at the end of the video. I provide the figure at the end of every video. But for this working mechanism, we need to draw one more figure, which is of the eyeball forming the image of the object. So here you do not need to draw the eyeball in detail, but first of all we need to draw a figure that this is simply the shape of the eyeball, and then draw the shape of the lens. So this is just a graphical photographic representation of the eyeball. So what happens is that whenever there is an object here, now we'll draw an arrow here. If this is the object here, what happens is that the light which is coming from the object, it goes somewhat like this, and we know that this is a convex lens. The eye lens is a sort of convex lens, and the convex lens, they always converge the light rays. If you see the convex lens, you'll see that the light rays which are entering the convex lens, it gets converged. So it is a sort of converging lens. So whenever the light from the object, it enters into the eyeball from through the lens, these light rays, they get converged. So it gets converged somewhat this way, okay, and from the upper surface also light is entering into the eyeball, and it gets converged. So in this way the lower part is here and the upper part is here, so it forms an inverted image. Again I'll draw a clear figure. So see, first of all draw the shape of the eyeball. So this is the eyeball, and draw a lens. Draw somewhat bigger lens so that it will be easier. Draw a arrow which is representing the object. So see, from the lower part of the object light is going, and then what happens is that this light rays get converged. So it is slightly converged, not much, but it is slightly converged. So this is one part, and then from the upper part again the light is going, okay, again it gets slightly converged, only slightly, okay. So in this way we see that the lower part goes upside and upper part goes on the lower side. In this way an inverted image is formed. Now what happens is that this inverted image, the optic nerves carry this information, these impulses to the brain, and the brain, they invert the image which is formed, and then we see the erect image of the object. So that's the figure for the working mechanism. Now when we write about the working mechanism of the eye, we just write that this eye, it is acting as a photographic camera. Ray of the light, it falls on the lens after passing through the conjunctiva, cornea, pupil, and then finally on the lens, and the lens converges the light rays on the retina. So see, once I'm writing, the light rays, they enter through the conjunctiva, cornea, pupil, and finally on the lens. Now what happens is that this lens, it converges the light rays and forms an inverted image on the retina. So now an inverted image is formed on the retina. So the optic nerves, they carry this information to the brain, and the brain, it inverts the image formed, and we see finally the erect image of the object. So that's all about the working mechanism, which is very easy, just the basic knowledge. So that's all about the structure and working mechanism of the eyeball. So finally, if we are told to write about the eyeball, we just give a morphological information about the muscles, and then about the 3 layers of the eyeball, and then finally a bit information about the lens, and finally the working mechanism is very easy. Just the light rays, they enter, and then the image is formed. So now all the clear figure I'll provide at the end of this video. And yeah, if you're getting confused between the names of the 3 parts of the eyeball, you can just remember that the outer fibrous layer, it consists of 3 layers: sclera, cornea, conjunctiva. It means SCC. And the middle vascular, it consists of choroid, ciliary body, and the iris. So it consists of CCI. So remember SCC and CCI. Okay, the short forms, you can create your own short forms as well, the tricks to remember. So with this, we end this video. Now wait till next video. Till then, take care. Goodbye.